Welcome along to Critical Disability Studies at Manchester Metropolitan University. I'm very, very pleased to have with me today Kristjana Kristiansen from Trondheim University. Kristjana, could you tell me a little bit about your job and the research that you're doing at the moment?
Well, most of the research that I do is connected to what you might be called mental health, but for a long time I've worked around deinstitutionalization efforts in a number of countries, including Wales and England and the United States. And now I'm working on a project called Madness in the Mountains. Otherwise, what I teach is qualitative methods at the master's and doctoral level.
Right. Tell me, can you tell that's a very good place to start. Can you tell me a little bit about this current project then? Because for me, it captures some of the things I would associate with you and your research.
The madness part.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's an international effort, so we have people from different countries. I've been working a lot with people from Canada and the United States, mostly people working in people living in isolated areas who have serious mental health problems, but who have decided to live outside of society, away from helping services, often in the mountains. And the stories of resilience are very important, especially actually these days in the United States, where they have to survive literally from day to day sometimes. But in Norway also we've interviewed a lot of people.
Now, mental health and disability studies, they kind of, in many ways, I suppose there's been some kind of clashes, or there's been some definitely debates about the place of mental health in disability studies. What's your particular take upon that?
I think that's happened in most countries, and although Peter Beresford and I may disagree on many things, one thing we agree on is that the field of mental health has much to learn from disability studies, and certainly the other way around. That the major life experiences of people with mental health difficulties have to do with the social consequences, the experiences, the way they've been treated, the way they've been understood, the way they've been described, and then it falls very well under the umbrella. But I also understand that very many people in mental health organizations around the world feel that still disability is so connected to a medical way of thinking that they don't want to be under that umbrella.
Let's look from a disability studies perspective and what that could learn from mental health. What kind of things could disability studies researchers learn from the mental health area, do you think?
Well, we could get back to gender, which is what we were supposed to be talking about. Historically and also now, there are, first of all, epidemiological things that, for example, for over 100 years, in most countries, more women are diagnosed with depression than men. No matter how we understand the categories or how reliable or valid they are, it happens. And some other also disability categories, such as multiple sclerosis, are more associated with women. MD is more associated with men, but that's genetically explained. But when these epidemiological patterns happen that are gender related, that are only looked at as a variable or a pattern without any kind of a feminist gaze to look at why. Why, for example, in most countries do women get more labeled with depression, and talking about so-called psychotic depression.
Yeah.
You know, there's hormonal explanations, there's this, there's that, but that's interesting, and how they've been treated through the years. Another issue that's related to that is that who seeks help. Women seek help often earlier than men.
Right.
They are better at putting words on what their problems are.
Yeah.
They're better at seeing problems that other people have and putting words on that. So the whole sort of self-reporting thing is different, and whether that's instinct or learned, who cares? It's real.
That's the reality of that, yeah.
Yeah, and the same thing happens with in the caring field. You know, women are usually the carers. This is also, of course, another gender issue. They're the ones who are taking care of not just their own family, but often the larger community family, and so they also have an often unpaid role there in reporting problems, reporting things, and that's a gender issue that's not really looked at. What in Norway, I got to get back to gender. It's now required that if you get state money to do research, you have to take up gender.
Right.
So what happens? A lot of people take it up. They take it up as a variable.
Right. Okay.
You know, like how many square meters do you have in your toilet, or, you know, and they don't have the analytic gaze to understand when they see the differences between men and women, boys and girls, to look at why is this happening.
Yeah.
So it then just becomes, okay, well, there are more men or women or boys or girls and in with things like ADHD, which is, you know, they say, oh, there's more and more of them. Not just Danny Goodley. You can get that out.
Can we? I'm glad we brought it back to gender. That's staying in. Going back to the gender thing, because I think there's some very similar kind of issues raised and the crossover between mental health and disability, but also with gender and disability. Do you feel that disability studies has tackled feminist issues enough?
I think more scary is the other way around. Feminism has not addressed disability issues. They look at race, they look at color, they look at poverty, they look at, and there is like huge absence. A few years ago, the Nordic feminists, we are a few, who work in disability studies, went to a feminist conference, and we were put in a room that wasn't even accessible to take up the disability session, and there were maybe 5 people, and 2 of them couldn't get up the stairs because they were in wheelchairs, and it's very confusing. Whatever intersectionality is all about, there are good questions to ask. How much can one, you know, group of theories help another? But I think, in a way, disability studies is becoming more conscious about gender issues than the other way around, and I think that's quite frightening. After all, more than half of the people in the world are women, especially in war-torn countries. And men and women are different, as you may have noticed.
Well, I mean, these seem to be very serious issues. If you've got
extremely.
But if you're looking at if we take that suggestion you got there that feminism has not engaged with disability issues, why do you think that is?
I have no idea.
I mean, is it something about disability that kind of troubles or queers the kind of arguments that are going on within a particular area?
Possibly.
Do you know what I mean?
For example, I tried to do a conference a couple of years ago in Norway, which supposedly is very gender aware, or Iceland, where we are now, is supposed to be very gender aware. And the feminists say, well, you know, sometimes, this is going to sound very naughty, but sometimes they seem to be quite selfish. So they're interested in why do we have so few professors who are women? Or why are we so poorly paid, we, meaning professionals? And we take up issues of what about the disabled men and women who can't even get into this university? It's like, well, I never thought about that. I said, well, that's why I want to do this. And okay, so, you know, 10 people show up, and we had a room reserved for 200. But if you do something on why don't we have more women professors, the room will be full.
Right.
So it's not exactly a selfish element, but it's, maybe.
There's something maybe about our relationship with the academy. If we look then at the other side, so the way that disability studies has drawn upon feminist theories, I mean, for you personally, what kind of feminist ideas have been helpful for you to think through disability issues?
Well, certainly Carol Thomas's work is a classic. Female Forms is probably one of the most important books I've ever read. I would also say that Donna Reeves' work, although it's lesser known because women are more maybe able or willing to talk about issues like pain and incontinence and so on than men. And otherwise, well, there's, you know, a number of classics sort of at the intersection there, but Harding and Susan Wendell. Right.
I mean, going back to Carol Thomas's and Donna Reeves' work, I mean, I also found that, well, very refreshing because they've turned, you know, whilst aware of the barriers out there, they're talking about the barriers in here. And it seems to me that feminists have been the ones to actually talk through those kind of issues around the body and around issues of pain and also around psychology more than men have, or non-feminist theories.
Yeah, I mean,
why do you think that is?
Well, again, is it instinct or is it learned? I don't know, but many of our good men friends, as you know, have problems with incontinence or this or that, and they don't discuss it. They don't go to conferences and discuss it as an issue. Or having sex, which of course they do.
Yeah, we'd hope.
We know, but no, but it's and it's. I think it's very interesting because it isn't just women with disabilities or women who care for people who have disabilities, but it's something about women in general are better about describing feelings, putting words on things, talking, you know, impairment exists. And that didn't come from the boys of the social model, that came from the women.
I mean, on that, can I ask you, because not wanting to place anyone in just one framework, but as a British-based researcher, one of the things that we have found fascinating has been this kind of development of what's become known as the Nordic relational model. Can you tell us a little bit about that model, and also your kind of relationship with it?
For us, could you turn that off for a minute?
Yep.
Because well, the Nordic relationship, I mean, first of all, the social model changed a lot of things in Britain. You know, everybody has said this before. It was important, although it's not a model and it isn't even really social. But it was important as a political movement, and it was important to make a dichotomy, which is not very real if you followed Jan Grue's work. The Nordic relation model has existed sort of way before that. It started with the work of normalization, Denmark, Sweden, and then we built very heavily on Wolfensberger's work, that the problem is not in the person. It has to do with how the person is perceived, treated, not just individually but also collectively in society, and that it's called the relationship model because it's a dialogue between the person and society, you could say, perceptually and also in terms of discourse. And that you know, it's interesting because normalization, if you hear the word used politically, they say, for example, England should normalize relations with Northern Ireland. It means, you know, put things back into balance. Often the imbalance is between the haves and the have-nots. And so for us, that's the relation. So the social model is like, well, is this some kind of new thing? No, we've been doing this since the 60s and 70s. And it's connected to the welfare state and the social democracy. So the dichotomy thing, I think, is, you know, it's nuts.
And so we're talking here about the dichotomy between impairment and disability and the medical and the social models.
Or the cultural or the this or the that. That's why I think the spaghetti metaphor today was quite a nice mess.
Can I ask about that? Because one of the interesting things that I've seen of there are criticisms of the relational model. Was twofold I've seen recently. One, that actually the Nordic relational model sounds very much like the New World Health Organization kind of categorization of disability participation and so on, which some people find therefore problematic. But another criticism has been that in the Nordic relational model, the body remains kind of unproblematic. It's not kind of socially theorized. How would you respond to that point?
We don't ignore impairments, is the point. I mean, so it's not, it doesn't disappear. The body doesn't disappear. Impairments don't disappear. As far as the convention is concerned, I think that's based on a bunch of false hopes. I think the rhetoric is lovely. We've had a human rights convention since 1948 for all people in the world. Yeah, how much has that helped, and who? Right around the corner from where it was signed, millions of people were killed. And so conventions just mean, really, you know, the word, it's like we all agree that this is a nice thing. There's no teeth in it.
Right. And do you think that that's the main problem with the UN Convention, then, that is
with all conventions?
The lack of teeth to it. The
Yeah.
fact that people can... is that because people are just viewing it, obviously, as a good idea, and it has no kind of legal teeth? Is that the main issue you have with it?
Yes.
Right.
And that's typical of conventions in general. People agree, this is a nice thing to do, we should do this, but there's no policing of it. Not that I believe in the police. But I mean, nobody can come in and say, okay, there's 87 concrete things you have to do to implement this, and we're going to check you. They tried to do this with the last convention. And they could go around, they can give advice to countries, and then countries can say, that's interesting.
Okay, the last question I've got for you, Kristjana, is there will be some students, undergraduates and postgraduate students watching this movie, we hope. What kind of, what would you say would be some of the kind of the key areas of research that you would like to see being tackled over the next, say, 5 years?
Well, because my particular concern right now has to do with people with long-term mental health problems and what their everyday life is like. I think in terms of methodologically looking at everyday lives, and I don't just mean narrative stuff, but also being with people out and seeing what their daily lives are like. In spite of the fact that Norway has a pretty good economy, most people are still living on the fringes of whatever that good economy is about in every country. So there's something about finding out what people's lives are like.
Right.
And otherwise, methodologically, the way I work is that in almost all my projects, on purpose, I have people with long-term serious mental health problems as my co-researchers. And that's an epistemological issue that I have to fight for, but that's how I work.
Kristjana, thank you very much.